this meter, you'll see that meter.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much to the residents who are here this evening in person, and thank you to the residents who are watching at home or who may be watching this at a later date. I'm Mayor Laurie Jadwin. I'd like to thank you for taking time out on a Thursday evening to join us for a town hall discussion on the Creekside redevelopment strategy. You know, back in 2020, when we were forced to go virtual, opened the door for us on the ability to find another avenue and mechanism to communicate with residents. Over the past 18 months or so, we have been holding a series of town hall meetings on a variety of topics. Everything from the sidewalk maintenance program to a sewer project on the west side, to recently a town hall meeting that we had talking about a major roadway project that's happening right in the heart of our industrial zone. So these town halls that we are now presenting give us an opportunity to interact directly with you, to share information with our residents at home, to give you the chance to go back and watch it later if you're not able to be here in person. Or if you have nothing else to do, check out a city video. So all of those town hall discussions are posted on our city's YouTube page. You can go back and watch them. And this one will live there as well after tonight is over. At the outset, before we even begin, there's been a lot of great discussion already happening here in council chambers over the last hour, just about Creekside, about how passionate our residents feel about Creekside, how they feel about this project, but we're going to talk a little bit more about what this project is. But before we talk really about what the Creekside redevelopment strategy is, I think it's important to talk about why we are even having a Creekside redevelopment strategy. There clearly is a great deal of momentum that's happening right now in Central Ohio and around the state of Ohio. If you pick up the news, certainly Columbus Business First pretty much every day has some announcement of a business expansion or jobs that are being added to the Central Ohio area. The recent Intel announcement is indicative and reflective of jobs that are to come to this region. A few weeks ago, we had the honor of hosting Lieutenant Governor Husted at an economic development forum on this similar topic. It was really geared toward the business and development community, but he talked about Ohio's stature now on a national level in terms of job attraction and business attraction and the growth that our economy is seeing. And that trickles down to us. This Intel project that's coming is 10 to 20 minutes away from us. We're going to feel the impact whether we like it or not. So how can we best prepare for that? Just recently, my staff and I met with Morpsey to talk about projects that we have underway, and we talked generally about what we are seeing within the Central Ohio area. The original projections for population growth that came out a few years ago were staggering when they came out. And it's even more astonishing now to realize that we are actually further ahead in those projections. And at this point in time, it is estimated that we will be adding 900,000 people to the Central Ohio area within the next 30 years. And to put that in perspective for you, that is like saying that a city the size that Gahanna currently is there will be one city the size of Gahanna added to the Central Ohio area each year for the next 30 years. So we're going to have all these little Gahannians running around all Central Ohio, if you look at it that way. But think about what that means. A city of our size being added to the Central Ohio area each year for the next 30 years. And that overall projection, that population projection, was made before the Intel announcement was ever made. For those who may not know, Chandler, Arizona, the area where Intel located back in the 1980s, saw explosive growth after Intel located there. It went from a community that was just under 30,000 in 1980 to a community in 2020 that was over 275,000 people. And 100,000 of those people moved to that community within the last 20 years alone. Not saying that we're going to have that kind of explosive growth in Gahanna, but we certainly can expect, again, to feel the impact of that growth right here in our city. In fact, we have seen growth. If we look at the census numbers from 2020, to the extent that they're correct, we have seen an 8% growth rate over the last decade here in Gahanna, an 8% growth rate. Given those numbers, my development team is projecting anywhere between a 4% and a 12% growth rate over the next 30 years. And that's basically you take 8%, an average of 8% growth over the last 10 years, figuring 50% less, 50% more, you come up with a 4 to 12% range of projected growth over the next 30 years. That means we're looking at anywhere from being just over 40,000 residents to just over 50,000 residents by the year 2050. And we've got to be ready for that. And we want to get ready for the following generations that are to come. The fact is we've already started to see the growth. Last year, the city saw a substantial increase in the number of new and retained jobs that we added to our city, nearly 1,000 jobs. In addition, we saw large-scale investment in the capital investment sector with more than $180 million of new construction and expansion projects that were added here to the city. Those are projects that are now currently underway or in the building review process, about to be under construction. And they covered a multitude of sectors, everything from manufacturing, logistics, residential, as well as medical. With respect to housing, you likely have seen multi-family projects going up all over Central Ohio. If you drive around 270, you see multi-family projects going up in every community. They're going up to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west of us. Right now, with the Central Ohio population projections, we cannot build them fast enough to accommodate the growing housing needs that are happening right here in the Central Ohio area. And again, whether we like it or not, we are part of the Central Ohio area. And everywhere around us is growing. We're going to face that as well. We have to be prepared for that. Last year in 2021, we added 3 multifamily projects to Gahanna that were approved through Planning Commission. They are now currently under construction or, again, in the building review process. Those are the first multifamily projects that have been added to Gahanna since 2015. It's a drop in the bucket. I think it's about a total of about 360 units as well. Back in 2015, 2016, we had an economic development strategy that was done, and that strategy back in 2016 said that we needed to add 720 housing units by the year 2025. We added nothing until last year with 360 that are now under construction. So, and it's 2022. Those will be hopefully built this year and next year. But we still have a long way to go from projections that were made back in 2016 when you look at it that way. With all that is already happening in Gahanna and all that is projected to be coming, it is imperative that we prepare as we reimagine and rebuild for the future. Unlike Chandler, Arizona, the Central Ohio area and Gahanna specifically already have density with built-out neighborhoods. We don't have a whole lot of land available to start new single-family dwelling housing developments all over the area. It's just not going to happen for us. So our key challenge is to meet the needs of future opportunities, including and especially related to Intel, which means working with their suppliers, working with their partners, preparing for the growth and the impact that their employees and the employees of their partners and suppliers are going to bring to Gahanna. Operationally, we are already responding here at the city. The growth that we are experiencing, the significant increase in the number of projects that we have currently underway here are leading us to reimagine and reevaluate how we are operating. Internally, we're realigning staff to make sure that we are as customer-centric as possible, and looking at the resources that we have on hand and what we need to support the demands that are being placed upon us as we continue to see projects, capital projects as well as development projects. An example of the momentum that we're already seeing here in Gahanna is the Crescent project. It's a project we talked a lot about in 2021, and it's well underway. For those of you who may not be familiar with that, it's the Crescent at Central Park, located on Tech Center Drive, on a parcel of property many in Gahanna know as the Buckles Tract, just immediately on the other side of 270 at Hamilton and Tech Center Drive. Overall, that project is a 100-plus acre project that is comprised of medical, office, commercial, retail, green spaces, parkland. Last year, there was a residential portion of that project that was approved for 240 housing units. As soon as that project was approved, we saw immediate growth and impact over in that area. 2 new medical office buildings have opened since that project was announced. And at the State of the City address that we had just a few months ago, we announced that 4 new medical office buildings will be added to that area. It will complete the entire northeast quadrant of the Crescent, adding high-quality, sustainable jobs, creating job opportunities for our residents in the medical field. Right now, our development team is working with the lead developer on the Crescent Central project to focus really on the northwest side. The residential projects, as you can see, are right in the middle, and then the northwest side will be office, commercial, retail, truly transforming that area into a live, work, play area. Another project that was really critical for us in 2021 that's underway in 2022 and will be completed by the end of the year is the ADB Safegate project. That is a project that's located right at the corner of Science Boulevard, Tech Center Drive. ADB Safegate is a long-standing business here in the city of Gahanna. They've been here for almost 40 years. They are a leader in the aerospace industry, offering high-quality STEM jobs that bring good payroll and, again, good quality jobs to our community. They chose Gahanna for their expansion area. We fought to keep them here. We were thrilled that they wanted to remain here on the property where they are now building. It's right up at the corner, again, Science and Tech Center, right by Franklin Peak Golf Depot. That maybe is more familiar to you. They're building what is essentially their North American headquarters, and it will be their center of innovation, that they'll be bringing people in there. But their announcement has furthered their investment in the city of Gahanna and has really expanded Gahanna's presence in the manufacturing and R&D industry. Since the Intel announcement, my development team has already been busy fielding inquiries from partners and suppliers of Intel, of that huge organization. Given our close proximity to the site, we continue to work with developers on looking at our industrial spaces that we currently have, looking at our small to medium-sized office spaces, how we can refurbish those and make those accessible and ready to really help supply what they need in terms of resources. With COVID, the impact of COVID, we have a 42% office vacancy right now. People are working from home. So how do we take those beautiful vacant office buildings and repurpose those into something that will meet the needs of the future is something our team has been working on. But beyond these office and industrial opportunities, as the region continues to grow, we need to identify and pursue opportunities for people to invest locally. The heart of Gahanna's economy is small business. We, in our development team, define small business as an employer with 20 people or less. 92% of the businesses here in Gahanna fit within that definition. 92% of our businesses have 20 employees or less. They are the small business. They are the heartbeat and backbone of our economy here. So it is critical that we have in place what we need to support those businesses to continue to make sure that they are successful. Just to put in perspective the importance of supporting local, an average of 2/3 of every dollar, 67 cents, spent at a small business in the United States stays within the local economy. And every dollar that is spent in the local business results in another 50 cents that is spent in that local economy through the purchase of local goods and supplies and through those employees spending their money here within the community where they're working. So there's no question that buying local supports, that's not me, there we go, supports local both from a socio and economic standpoint, and it increases jobs and it keeps our money flowing. So with that, we need to pursue opportunities that will encourage local shopping and dining to support our local businesses, our local retail places, those small businesses, so that we can continue to drive Gahanna forward. When we support small businesses here in Gahanna, especially that represent 92% of our economy, they are successful, they attract jobs, it allows us to attract new businesses that attract new workers who pay income tax because it adds residents. New income tax means more revenue for the city to then turn around and invest back in providing services and amenities to the residents. And ultimately, it eases the burden to our existing residents. So growth is not a bad thing. We have to keep always looking for how we can increase our income tax base. To implement this approach, my office has been leading a redevelopment effort over the past 10 and a half months at this point. It's on a redevelopment strategy for the Creekside District. The Creekside District is the heart of our downtown. It's the heart of our city. It's our core. And just a few weeks ago when I mentioned this, I talked about exercising. And everybody always talks about making sure that your core of your body is really strong, right? Your back and your abdomen muscles. And that core has to be strong to support everything else that your body has to do. And when your core is weak, the entire rest of your body is weak as well. Well, the Creekside District is our core. It has to be strong. It has to be able to support the rest of our community. And that's what this redevelopment strategy does. So right now, everybody's asking, what is this redevelopment strategy? So right now, we'd like to quickly show you a video. It was put together by M&A Architects, our partner on the redevelopment strategy, just to give you an idea of what this strategy is about and what we've done so far. I was talking to a resident earlier, and I mentioned the fact that Gahanna is known for the city of plans. We've done plans and surveys, and I see a lot of head shaking right now. We have a lot of plans that have been done through the years, and nothing's ever happened. This is not that. This is much more than a plan. This is a strategy. It's a roadmap. When we started out on this project back in July of 2021, and we engaged M&A architects on this, we gave them every plan that's been done. We gave them the old Gahanna Vision Plan. We gave them the land use plan. We gave them the surveys that fed into the land use plan and the old Gahanna Vision plans. We gave them the economic development strategy. Every piece of material that we had that involved input and engagement from the Gahanna residents, we provided to them because we did not want to start from scratch. We did not want to reinvent the wheel. I did not want to reinvent the wheel. We told them, here's what our Gahanna community has told us. And they've been consistent. If you look at responses that the Gahanna community has given us from 20 years ago, it reads as if you answered it yesterday, because nothing's really happened a whole lot in the last 15 years. So you've been consistent in telling us what you want. Where we have gotten stuck is trying to figure out how to get to where we want to go. This strategy is going to help us get to where we want to go. So what I'd like to do now is introduce our Director of Economic Development. He's been the lead on this project since July of, 1845? It feels like 2021. And he's going to talk to you a little bit more about what exactly the strategy entails, where we are right now, and what next steps could look like. Nate Strum, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So we've seen some slides earlier, and I want to highlight some of the product that we've been talking a little bit about this evening. The first one being, Kevin, if you can help me here and go back 2 by chance. Keep going back 2 more before the video. One of the things we've really highlighted as part of the strategy has been understanding the fabric of the neighborhood. I had a lot of conversations even this evening around what the history of the area is, what the architectural wants are in the area. One of the things we really want to highlight here is, we're not here to redefine the neighborhood. We're here to actually realize some of the valuation that was supposed to come with Creekside and really maximize what those opportunities look like. So what you see here is the first iteration of what a revisioned North High Street could potentially look like. The orientation for those who are seeing online aren't necessarily here. In the foreground of the photo is where, or the rendering, would be about where Walnut Street is, looking down, looking south along North High Street. Here, given our proximity to the existing homes in the neighborhood, I think it's very important to focus on a for-sale home product. So to maximize not only the land availability, but also the wants and needs of the community and what we're seeing as what products are being sold and what's missing in our gap spaces here. We're focusing on a for-sale townhome type product to really kind of blend into the existing homes in the neighborhood itself. We thought it was really important to have a for-sale product in these spaces because the existing neighborhood is there, the existing homeowners are there, and they've already made those existing investments. I'm going to go skip ahead to avoid the video. This would be a reimagined Mill Street. We're going to talk a lot about Mill Street, or otherwise known as State Route 62. In this rendering here, what you're really starting to see is Mill Street. The property being shown is where the existing Erie Insurance Building is, owned by Tom Snyder. This would be a utilization. We envision this for some type of hotel type use. My office has received a number of inquiries from both residents who want to utilize the event center and for weddings and other events and have a proximity to a hotel in the area, as well as private development partners who are looking for a lodging amenity to service the existing Creekside area for restaurants, nightlife, trails, open space plaza engagements. They really see a boutique hotel could be a really great value here as part of an opportunity. And we agree, quite frankly. When you look through what the lens could be and how it could support our partners that visit Gahanna from an increase of the bed tax here in our community, this could be a tremendous opportunity to maximize what the existing investments have already been at Creekside and realize that to maximize that tourism dollar in our community as much as it is for our actual residential dollar as well. This is a fully realized Mill Street. To give you some bearings, where you see on that rendering those bollards in the street, that could be a partially blocked Walnut Street. So if I'll be standing right where the existing entry to the Creekside garage would be. And so on the The northern side would be where what I call the Howard Johnson's, because that's what it reminds me of. It's an existing two-story multi-office building currently. The hotel we referenced earlier would be on the right-hand side of that rendering. But what this really does is it allows for us to work with our partners at Make Gahanna Yours, the Historical Society, as they're doing events in the Creekside area, to be able to stretch them into the neighborhood a little bit. So we're not necessarily having to block off Mill Street all the time, but we're able to actually integrate that into the fabric of the neighborhood back into the community itself and really maximize what that could look like. In my travels and my experiences, I think these types of uses are really advantageous for our community because you have really well-defined corridors for pedestrian traffic. So on the weekends, these can be put up for some al fresco dining or some outdoor street fair activities, while still maximizing what those first floor commercial activities could be, restaurants, other things we saw in the video. I know the video highlighted a real heavy interest in food markets or other destination dining type establishments. This could really kind of accentuate not only the new development, but also further establish the partners who are already at Creekside, quite frankly. Again, I can't emphasize this enough, though. What you're seeing this evening is highly preliminary. We're really kind of focusing on what the massing could look like. I've heard a lot of comments this evening around architectural styles, aesthetics, fabric of the community, and I understand all of those questions, quite frankly. Change is never an easy topic to address. What will need to happen as part of the future development planning, once we go through this process with the strategy and we identify what the next steps are, one of those next steps is to do some market validation and going into the private market to see what actually could go into these spaces. We have some ideas. You see them here this evening, but these may not be the end-all, be-all. We hope that these are things that are aligned to what that vision could look like and that strategy can happen. But as it relates to materials, brick versus stone, facades, the incorporation of public art, what spaces are actually fully needed to do this from a massing standpoint. Those are things that will be worked out as part of a final development plan. And I know I've heard from about maybe a dozen folks this evening in the room around parking. I completely agree. I always say this as a reformed, I call myself a reformed planner in this role. So I used to be a planner. I then got into the transactional, the economic development side. I'm always willing to solve the parking problem. If your community has a parking problem, that's a great problem to solve for. That means that you're in a space where people want to be, people want to experience, people want to visit, people want to spend time in, spend resource in. And so as we were looking through these lenses and we start maximizing what this development looks like while still keeping the character and the tone of Gahanna, I think you'll start seeing where we can place either some type of limited or full structured parking to make sure that, and I will say this, although I won't commit to it, I fully also appreciate people have an aversion to subterranean parking or subsurface parking. We will certainly do our best to make sure that it's a comfortable parking garage of some sort, using modern design standards to support the economic growth of the area. That all being said, I do want to turn it back to the mayor and open it up for a little Q&A, either from the streaming audience who may not be able to join us this evening, or for those in the audience. We have the microphone set up. We'd love to hear your feedback, a little bit of what you're seeing this evening, and answer any of the questions you have. Again, we know that change is never easy, and so we understand that for a lot of you, this could be a very jarring kind of shakeup to what you've had in the Creekside area or what your vision for Gahanna could be, and we'd love to hear that feedback.
Any questions? Is this one coming? Yeah, I can say, don't you go anywhere.
I'm going to stretch out over here.
Any questions thus far? Jeannie, I don't know, you might need to come up here so that.
We've received over 700 responses on the survey.
And it's still up.
It's still open.
It's still up and available. We're not going to take it down anytime soon.
Yeah, it's still rolling. The initial responses were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 to 500, and then in the last week or so, we saw an uptick of about another additional 200 kick in.
Yeah. And for those of you who are watching at home, or for those of you who might be here who don't know, the survey is available on Gahanna.gov. You can click on that, and it's a very easy survey to take. It'll take maybe five minutes of your time. But a lot of those statistics that you saw at the end of that video are what came from that survey. Kira, can you? Because that way the people at home can hear you. Thank you.
I'm still trying to understand exactly where we're starting and where we're ending. So if we're on Mill Street, tell me what existing building would be the start of this development? Are we just talking to the north of the actual Creekside Plaza area? Are we talking from Walnut Street or Town Street, or where exact? Like, to be honest, I'm wondering what's leaving, what's getting wiped out.
Sure.
What's gone?
So we've really targeted a lot of this activity. What you've seen this evening are the real high impact areas around the Walnut Street area. But I think we're really kind of visioning down from Carpenter, where the existing EMH&T building, former EMH&T building is.
That's gone.
Vacant buildings.
So
down
that would be
through-
gone.
Down through at least where the Erie Insurance building would be, if not to include all the way down to
To
where the
signatures? Maybe up to signatures? Like signatures is safe, but
No, I would think that right now the targeting area would be the end of where.
Alley.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, and then the same on High Street. Are we talking all the way to Carpenter, or are we only talking
We
the
would be
buildings from like
From
North Street,
Walnut down to the city lot.
Walnut down to City? Okay, so not up to North Street. Okay. All right.
On North High.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Sure, come on up.
Mr. Eric,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good.
And I may have missed this. I came late. But
Sure.
Are we talking, and it's kind of building off of that, a wholesale rezoning of a whole area, or is this going to be a parcel by parcel kind of thing?
Great question. So the zoning existing down there, I think it's the OCT2 or OCT. No, it's the it's OG2. Excuse me. I keep saying OCT and it's OG, Old Gahanna District 2. I don't think the zoning was going to change. I think what the zoning is today will be the zoning necessary to support what we're even proposing this evening moving forward. I think what you're looking for as part of the initial phase of development would be the redevelopment of anywhere between 4 and, let's call it 3.5 to 5.5 acres worth of total land mass
Okay.
down there.
So we're really talking a rather small area. Okay.
Just to be clear, I want to be candid with this too. From the 3.5 to 5.5 acre space, that's about 3/4 up to 1.5 times the size of the existing Creekside development.
Okay.
But that's all combined.
It's
not
all combined.
One large, no, it's not.
Not one
it's
contiguous
one-
lot.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
All right. Then I'll follow up with my second question. As a longtime member of the Bicycle and Trails Advisory Committee, I'm encouraged to hear about the connection in the bicycle part, because someday, if Columbus ever gets their stuff together, the Gahanna bike path will connect into Westerville and point southward. And as a cyclist myself, I know that there's a lot of destination cyclists who like to ride in the morning, stop for coffee and/or breakfast.
Sure.
Exactly.
And kind of make it a social event. So I'm very encouraged to hear that, and hopefully the committee will continue to be able to provide some input to that.
Do you want to speak about Linkus?
Yeah, so we actually have been meeting with CODA and the Linkus team around the multimodal elements here in Gahanna in a broad sense, but certainly as part of this project. I'm actually meeting with their team tomorrow afternoon with Director Farrell to kind of talk through some of the park and rec engagements as it relates to the Linkus program that CODA is currently rolling out, and around not only the Creekside, west side part of the city, but also around our key corridors. So I think you're going to see a very robust multimodal component that certainly includes bicycle transportation-related activities, as well as infrastructure to support that.
All right.
Actually, I want to add one more thing. So we are currently working with MORPC to seek funding to develop an active transportation plan. We spoke about this at council a few weeks ago. What an active transportation plan does is it looks at everything from bike trails to sidewalks, crosswalks, walking paths, and creates that overall again, strategy for what you need to put where and how to connect Gahanna with points north, south, east, and west. So once we get the funding for that, that'll be the next phase of what we work on is the active transportation plan. We have a lot of strategical planning going on here, laying the groundwork for how we're going to grow over the next several years so that we're not just shooting in the dark, we actually have a direction and we know where we're headed.
If I can ask one last question.
Sure.
I used to be an auditor. I could ask questions for the next 3 hours if you want.
Very fair.
I know this is about the development when we start talking about the traffic and things like that.
Sure.
And I'm trying to leave my opinion is other cities have no problem telling people to divert around their city, meaning like uptown Westerville, downtown Worthington. they're major routes, but they have no problem narrowing it down to a lane or two and say, you know what, if you want to get somewhere fast, go around us.
Correct.
That's traditionally not what I've seen the attitude of 62 and whatever. The roads coming through Gahanna, we seem to want to accommodate as much traffic as possible.
Correct.
Is there a philosophy on that going forward?
There is. So as part of this plan, we've engaged, so in addition to, Mayor mentioned working with Pond Design and M&A architects as part of some of this initial massing and transactional side of it. We've also engaged Carpenter Marty around what that transportation improvement could look like. One of the things we've actually identified as part of the traffic flow patterns in here is that a good majority of the traffic along the Mill Street corridor during the peak hours, and what peak's defined as anywhere between 6 and 9 a.m., and then again from about 3 to 6 p.m., most of them are commuter-based traffic patterns. They're not residential, they're just passing through the Mill Street, Creekside area and going into either the Whitehall highway infrastructure or back out into New Albany and points north. I think what you're going to end up seeing in this futurization or futurisms of what Creekside could be is just that. Because there's ways to deviate or divert that traffic onto the major thoroughfares that certainly could accommodate larger swaths of traffic, specifically Hamilton Road. If most of our traffic is being commuter-based traffic that's coming actually above where 62 meets Hamilton, which if you do the traffic analysis, that's really where it's boiling through. Diverting that traffic from 62 at Hamilton down Hamilton to either Cache 270 or down to Granville Road and then out to 670 makes a heck of a lot more sense. How we make that, I think the term that was used as part of our planning process was painful traffic for those who are commuters to avoid, to your earlier point. I think it's something that we still have yet to define, but I certainly think it's in the process of the conversation.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Tony.
Mike?
Well, there's people at home, so they need to hear you. Sorry. Thank you.
I was curious about the hotel, like how many rooms they're estimating?
Sure.
maybe,
Well, I think this is an idealized opportunity here. I think the conversation that we've had, especially in the private market, so as part of this strategy, we did some market validation to see if what we could think about from a residential standpoint, from a mixed-use standpoint, was real. What we heard back from the marketplace was this could be anywhere from a 60 to more boutique hotel. It'd be limited service because we have existing event space, meeting room space across the way, existing restaurants, existing trails. But they would really kind of see that being a break point for them. But it'd be that type of a size. And again, that also is defined by traffic or by parking as well, where that parking would go, how that would blend into the neighborhood as well. We can't build a 300-room boutique hotel. We don't have the space for it.
Do you want to speak to kind of some of the reach outs we've had from airlines and?
Sure. So one of the things we've actually had regularly in my office that trying to trigger this concept of lodging to not only support some of the initial activity in the Creekside area, maximize our restaurant spaces, but also support Visit Gahanna and some of the bed taxing that they use, was talking with airlines, quite frankly. They love Gahanna. Their workers love coming to Gahanna even for a night or two, a month, couple months. And so they would love to be able to underwrite some of these expenditures by having relationships with the local hotel properties, so they don't have to have their people on the airport grounds necessarily. They can be 5-10 minutes away in our community, grabbing dinner at one of our restaurants in Gahanna, spending at some of our small businesses, walking our trails, enjoying our community, quite frankly. And so that was something that kind of led into that initial conversation. And those tourism dollars are very critical. I mean, I don't care how you splice it. That's tourism, even on a micro scale. And so that is something that could help really drive a lot of the activity down here as well.
So, Mayor, I do have a few questions from online.
Okay.
Great.
They are all from the same user. I will make that note. But is there any thought on the renovations to the various buildings on the east side of Mill Street to make it more uniform? Right now, it's just a collection of ugly office buildings.
Without knowing where the terminus is of what they're kind of referencing, what we're defining as this project scope right now would be the east side of Mill, from Carpenter down to Walnut, maybe a little bit more south. So it would be part of that area.
Talk to the camera.
Oh, sorry. I'm staring at Kevin while I'm answering the question. You're probably staring at home going, that idiot's not looking at me. We're also including parts of the west side of Mill Street as well. So if you know where the Shampooch building is, the former CVB, that area is also defined as part of the project spec. As momentum begins, I think you could see additional opportunities on the corridor. But as it right now, those are the kind of the parameters on Mill Street at least that we're kind of targeting.
Okay, couple more here. Would there be a plan to sponsor the relocation of some of the current businesses to different locations to better reflect the desire of Creekside? Then they gave an example. There are currently 5 insurance businesses, businesses down there in the Creekside area.
That's a great question. And so one of the things that we're looking through a lens of as we're looking through the redevelopment process is anybody who's displaced temporarily, trying to identify how do we keep them in Gahanna, both ideally in the Creekside area, but if not in Creekside, where else could accommodate them even on a temporary basis. As it relates to that specific question, it's actually quite timely. My team and I had a chance to go out to Bell Fountain today. We spent about 6 hours with Small Nation about what they've been doing for their historic downtown revitalization efforts. And they said the same thing, that there are times where in their community they have these lesser than activated office users. Think financial advisors, attorneys, and they still create a churn, but they're not nearly as activated as, say, a restaurant or a hair salon or a pharmacy or a fitness facility or things of that nature. So they too are struggling with that exact thing. I think as activation continues to happen, quite frankly, from a financial advisor standpoint, I think the solution for us would be to identify an expanded co-working type environment, if I'm going to put my economic development hat squarely on, because you see a lot of those financial advisor professionals don't necessarily want to be in the office, but they need a space to meet with their clients potentially, either in a virtual or formal setting, but there's no place for them to do that right now other than their traditional office. So if we were able to expand, say, the C-suites opportunity that's existing into the Creekside area, or find another operator to kind of expand that co-working element into the neighborhood, I think you can see a true consolidation of some of those existing lesser activated uses in the neighborhood, and that opens up those spaces naturally for more activated uses that we've actually identified as part of the video that you saw this evening.
And
I
then
think
2 more quick ones.
Well, Kev, one thing I might add to that is zone. I had a question earlier, I think from a resident around zoning and our zoning code. Right now, we're also working on a rewrite of our 1958 zoning code. Back in 2020, perhaps maybe late 2020, early 2021, we had a design code survey that went out. And we broke Gahanna into various districts. Hopefully some of you participated in that. We focused on the Creekside district, and we had pictures of architectural styles and, you know, what do you like most about this? What would you like to see in this area? What would you like to see in that area? So that's going to get woven into the zoning code as we're rewriting that right now. One of the other ways to help address the question that was just raised about the types of businesses that are street front, and several other communities have done this, where you write into your zoning code that first floor businesses can only be a certain type of business. So that's something certainly that we probably need to look at as we're working on that zoning code right now, especially if we want to create that customer focused traffic to be on those first floor, so to help drive the support for the businesses in the area.
And 2 quick ones. Is there a site plan for the design yet? And then the last one is, when do you plan? What's the timing of the plan, and then potentially development of?
Sure. No, that's a great question. We'll start with the site plan question. As I mentioned earlier, I think the area of focus that we're kind of targeting is that Mill Street corridor on both sides, from Carpenter down to Walnut, maybe a little bit beyond, as well as those areas on North High. We don't have a well-defined site plan as of yet. As a timing standpoint, that's really going to be market-driven, quite frankly. There is the Community Improvement Corporation has been a leader in this space. I know Councilman Weaver's here this evening as a member of the board, as well as member Jodell Carter is here and they can answer some of your questions that the CIC's been working on. But they are looking through a request for proposals standpoint as it relates to what the marketplace could bear, what that timing would be. It has as many nuances as you like, from a takedown schedule, construction schedule, things of that nature. We just don't know because the private market hasn't told us what those timing elements could be. But I would anticipate having continued conversations like this around that in the coming months.
Timing.
Yeah, that was.
You got that. Sorry, I'm reading other questions. One other question.
I'm very long-winded, Kevin. I understand.
I get it. I fell asleep.
It's very fair. He's the IT guy. I fall asleep to his stuff all the time too.
How do you plan on identifying and approving which businesses get approved? And I guess maybe he means developed, she means developed. And who will do that approval?
Can you read that question
Yeah,
again?
can you repeat that?
How do you plan on identifying and approving which businesses get approved?
I think the business side of it, that goes through the zoning code. So you're not going to allow certain businesses into the area that aren't necessarily adopted or included as part of the zoning code process.
Well, but I think another part of the whole redevelopment strategy, you saw at the last part of the video in particular, where we gave statistics on what 700-plus residents have already told us the kind of businesses they want to see here. So part of this strategy is we go to the private development community and say, here's what our residents would like to see down here. Armed with those statistics, that then helps the private development community to be able to go out and solicit the businesses that you want to see there. I think there was a wine and spirit shop. So
a
a private
bakery.
developer knows that that is something that would be successful here because they already know the people want to support that. A bakery would be successful here because the people want to support that. So that will help to drive the types of businesses, but that really goes through the private development community.
And candidly, that also helps drive the engagement with the CIC. We're going to look through a lens of what those developers who may be interested in our community have a history of and relationships with for those type of businesses that we're looking to target and bring into our community. And then, identify them as being our preferred partners potentially because they have those experiences and they have those relationships that we may not necessarily have here locally.
Anything else? I'm going to say, Janine had her hand up earlier. Sorry.
It's just a pointing fest.
Sorry.
I wanted to find out, will you have restrictions on height? I think the buildings at Creekside are 3-story.
They're
Looks
actually
like
77 feet tall. The
Okay.
largest
Is
the
that-
largest building is 77 feet tall, or about 7 stories. The mixed-use apartment building is about 7 stories tall.
Oh, so I see this, and this is 4 stories. Is there going to be,
I think we're targeting in that
limit?
space. I think a 3 to 4 story is appropriate. It's funny, the mayor brought up our engagement with Lieutenant Governor's office, 2 weeks ago? And I won't put the elected official on point, but it was mentioned that the Mifflin Township Fire Department can go up to 8 stories, and they could certainly be happy to service
I
that
thought it was
type
11.
of. Yeah, it was higher than I was comfortable with going, quite frankly.
Everybody went, oh.
But I mean, we're looking through the design standards. I mean, this will go through Planning Commission ultimately from how it's going to be scaled and massed. I don't think anyone's looking to go to the height of what the existing buildings in Creekside are at all. I think we're looking for a much more scaled back.
And I'm going to go back to some of the answers we saw in the survey about everybody appreciates what they love most about Gahanna. It's the quaint feeling, the small town feel. I mean, we're a city of 36,000 people. We're not a small town, but we feel that way. So we don't want to lose that aesthetic of that, but at the same time, that doesn't mean we can be stagnant with what we're doing here. We still have to continue to prepare and grow and change and evolve because otherwise we're just going to shrivel up. So, but understanding those things that we love most about the community are what we want to maintain. So, as Nate just said, I don't think anybody's going to be looking for something that's 7-8 stories tall.
I mean, quite candidly, when we were working with the prior project that was exploring an opportunity on the east and west side of Mill for the apartment complex, they were looking at, I think, 5 or
Stories, five on both sides.
Yeah, and I think that was something that was beyond the pale to a degree for both my office as well as the mayor's office. So I think we're really looking to kind of figure out how it blends into the neighborhood and how it scales to the neighborhood.
All right. And keeping in mind, we have, the small residential homes that are along Shoal. So you have to transition. One of the things that we love about working with M&A architects is they understand the need to transition from the west side of Mill Street, which is Creekside Plaza, over to Shoal, where you have the small residential homes. So it's all about transitioning through there.
the other question I have is, you've talked about the north side of High Street? Whatever.
That's North High Street.
North High Street,
But that's on the north side of the street.
That's on the east
on
side
the
of the
east
street.
side of the street.
Okay, sorry. What about the west side?
Well, actually, one of the owners of the West Side properties is here, I believe. Is he hiding in the back? Yeah, his head just popped up. There are no plans to acquire any property or do anything on the west side at this point.
That's where, for the old timers, where the dollhouse was, and are we on the same?
Yeah, so you're looking at just immediately south of Walnut, right? There aren't any, we have no This doesn't address anything on the west side of,
There's an existing
south of
multi-family building there.
Walnut
There's
down on the west side.
another single residence there. There's some vacant land. We don't have that included as part of a reprogrammed space.
Marlowe's is not here, right?
Marlowe's is there on where the former
Yeah.
Aeropazo was.
It's just when, I'm looking at something that's that tall, and then on the other side of the street, it's
It's Mitch, if I can ask a question, how big is your building that's right across the street from the city lot? Is it 2 or 3 stories? 3 stories.
So we're looking at something that would be consistent in
Comparable
height.
size.
I guess I was talking further down the street.
So
Further
you're
down the
talking
street is
north of Walnut?
Okay, I'm
So you
mixed
have-
up on
you
the
have- Well, you have
streets.
Yeah.
Walnut and High, so.
So you have Marlowe's Cheesesteaks. And then you
Yes.
have a 3-story apartment building.
Right.
And then you have alley, some vacant land, and then a 1-story home. And then you have the street.
And then a 2-story apartment.
Yeah, across the
apartments,
street.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So a
yeah,
2-story, 3-story type concept would actually blend fairly well into that area. Plus the way it
What's there?
slopes up behind it, you have some significant height from the old schoolhouse that's back there as well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And one more on the line, Nate, sorry.
Sure.
Is there a plan for the premium unleased space at the front of Mill Street where the old bag and, probably old bag was?
So the question is, what's the plan for where the old bag and the poorhouse buildings currently are, and where those businesses operated? At this time, this plan does not account for or consider the redevelopment of those sites. One of the things we've really talked about, and we went back and forth on this as part of the strategy with M&A in particular, was what we're proposing in a lot of these spaces are uses that are actually truly transformative. There's something that's completely different there today than there has been in the past. So mixed-use building type use where the existing Hojo and potentially where the plant library car wash buildings are, where
Empty AMH&T.
yeah, where the Erie Insurance Building is doing some type of boutique lodging. These are big changes. These are where those buildings are. I think you're only ever going to see a restaurant, quite frankly. That site, the way it's scaled and the way it's sized on that wedge, it's going to be a end user restaurant today. It'll be an end user restaurant tomorrow. Whether or not that building needs to be reconsidered or redone in some way to maximize its footprint or done in the interior is not for me to decide. It's for the market to decide. But it's going to be a restaurant type user.
To that point, can you just kind of speak to our ability to fill that space? Because we get questions a lot about, well, what are you doing to drive somebody to the old Bag and Nails property, or what are you doing to fill the poorhouse? Can
Sure.
you speak a little bit to how that actually works?
Yeah, so actually I've got my team members here in the room. So I have my manager, Courtney Thrain from Economic Development, as well as my coordinator, Zach Dowley. We field inquiries from operators and prospective business owners all the time. And we pitch them those sites, and they tour those properties. I think some of the things that we've seen in those spaces, it just either doesn't make sense for their model as it stands today, or they're still under consideration for their use. I think, and the way we kind of pitch those sites to those businesses and those restaurant operators or bar operators or end users, they see the outdoor patio spaces in the rear. They see its connection to the creek. It has one of the best views, quite frankly, of the water features in the city. Those are huge selling. Yeah,
I think it's one of the best views in Central Ohio.
absolutely. The challenges is the cost of renovation right now, especially on the interior side, to maximize the footprint and the functionality, especially of the old bag space. There's also a fire variance that is between the two buildings. They have to stay in common ownership. Don't quote me on that because I believe that's a planning variance, but I've heard that multiple times from our building official.
Deed restrictions.
Deed
I
restriction.
think it was deed restrictions.
It has to be common ownership because of the proximity between the buildings themselves. But I mean, we pitch it regularly, and we continue to pitch it, and we continue to field interest in those properties, and we would love to see them included as part of this in a separate, meaningful development as part of what we're doing down here. And our hope, actually, quite frankly, is if we can build momentum in other parts of the neighborhood, that'll strive and drive future opportunities in other parts of the neighborhood, including those properties.
Is there a question over here?
Yes,
Angie?
ma'am.
So it sounds like a lot of the people who responded to the survey were concerned about keeping the family, vibe here. And So I was curious what's being thought about as far as Creekside, as far as like family attractions or kids attractions. Because I mean, a lot of families, we go there and, there's free things to do. You can play in the creek, you can play, go to the fountain, do things like that. But, we would spend money there if there were things
Sure.
to spend money on. I mean, there's the ice cream shop and that's about it.
That's it.
So I know you're looking to bring more housing and development in that sense, but I feel like there are already tons of people who just want to have more things to do there. So that was one concern. And then also my question about the housing, are those townhomes like 3-4 bedroom homes, or are those, I mean, I'm hoping that those are more family homes.
I would imagine they would be family homes or family oriented. Again, we would have to go to what the private development, whoever would be the constructor of that would be able to do their own market analysis to say this is what's going to best fit down here, both in a size and scale. I mean, if you go to a 3 or 4 bedroom style home, which I think is very appropriate in these spaces, quite frankly. I've already heard one resident this evening have a concern about the scale. So to get to a 3 or 4 bedroom, you're going to be at a 2 or 3 story, which I think is appropriate, but that might not be for everybody. So then if you're talking about 2 to 3 bedrooms, what does that scale look like? Candidly, when I've been looking through a lens of what that residential component looks like, I've been more focused on making sure that whatever happens on those sites, self-park. Because I want to make sure that those homes have the necessary parking to support whomever moves into those, I'm assuming 2 cars. But also they're not exasperating the existing neighborhood fabric as well. So as for your uses that you reference, I'll let the mayor speak to some of the existing stuff that's happening, but I think what this plan really does is allow for some of those variety of uses to drive that activity down there, to allow some more family-oriented activities to come into the marketplace, and hopefully, ideally, maximize some of the existing spaces that are also in Creekside to allow for more. We've talked to candy store. We've talked to some other. We actually were in a toy store today. We were talking to their ownership about trying to do something down here in Gahanna, just from an activity standpoint, and we work regularly with Parks and Rec to try to figure out how do we activate some of this space as well. But I think one of the drivers to your question is going to be finding new spaces, new unique spaces that allow for the mixture of those uses to come into the marketplace that drive that family engagement.
And certainly we heard that kind of experience-driven business, whether it's pottery, craft, those types of things, are wanted by residents, and that's what we're missing down there. People come down to eat and then they walk around because there's nothing else to do. So how do we attract those businesses there? So that's really part of what this whole strategy is about.
If I
Nope,
may.
you're done. No, sorry, just kidding.
Nope, Carrie, we don't want to hear from you anymore. All right. So, by the way, my name is Carrie Hawk, and I'm vice president of the local Gahanna Historical Society. So, some of my concerns deal with changes that, look, we got to change. I know. Things are happening. The world is expanding. We have to change. I accept that. I embrace that. However, when we do this work on Mill Street, that will take out the Herb Center house, the blank slate current location, the plant library, also where I have my flea market. And all I'm concerned about is, are we really thinking about how, those are all successful. Those are Gahanna known places, businesses, et cetera, events. Are we really considering how we're going to keep those things alive? I'm going to tell you now, that little stretch of Walnut Street, that won't do anything for the flea market. I got to have Walnut, High Street, Town Street. If I can't have Mill Street, I am willing to compromise. But I'm just saying that little stretch of Walnut Street is not enough for what I currently use Gahanna, downtown Gahanna for. And I hate to see the 2 adorable over 100-year-old houses be wiped out so that we can continue our quaint, charming village feel, because those are architecturally interesting and they're useful. They may not have always found their niche, but we're getting there, kind of like the Historical Society. It's growing. We're getting there. We're getting a name. The Herb Center is really getting a lot of use, but we're saying, well, we don't value these grandma houses. They got to go so we can put in, I know it hasn't been decided yet, but we want to put in something fancier and cuter and what we think is currently interesting. I love old stuff. I know a lot of people would like to see at least the consideration of those buildings somehow being, maybe we can put something behind the buildings, or maybe we can somehow keep one of them. They add a lot to the charm of our city. So number two.
Can
Have
we
we
address number
consid-
one before we go?
Let's address that,
Because I
yes.
think it's
So-
challenging to go through multiple questions and try to circle back.
Yes, please do.
So from a number one standpoint, actually, Mr. Roberson's here. We actually had an hour-long chat at your establishment earlier this week, ish. And so we understand the impacts to blank slate what will be happening here, and especially as the public art.
The plant library is really popular.
Correct. And I think, as I've said to the mayor and I've said to those in other public meetings, including at Herb Day,
Yeah.
I think I always have considered the plant library to be an elevated of sorts of a community garden, and I think it'd be best served from a structure and a standpoint to be incorporated as part of a public park, so that even if this project doesn't happen, it's not held by private lands that could determine tomorrow that they still need to go away, quite frankly. So I think it's in the best interest of that issuance, to move to Friendship, to move to the Southwest floodplain, to move to,
Next to Lilystone.
yeah,
Friendship sounds great, but a large part of business is because you're the most visible. You're on the most visible street. And I think
but if you're talking about a public asset, I don't think a public asset is best served by being held on private land.
Understood. I just hate to see things
But if you're
change
ta-
so drastically.
But if you want to preserve the public asset, it can't be maintained on private land. I mean, the private owner could come in tomorrow and say,
Right.
this needs to go away.
Right,
So
and-
it's
So it's best if you really
Plan it
truly want to
through.
preserve it, to find a
To find
place
a new home
where
for
it
it,
can
where it can be
stay
maximized.
and be sustained in a long-term basis.
Well, so that kind of leads to my point. Have we thought about a new home for it? Have we said, hey, we're going to have to take this away from you, but we're going to be able to put you over here, maybe on, I mean, is that part of what
Yes.
we're planning?
Yeah.
Okay, so where
Yeah,
these things
and
will go
like
and how
I've had
we,
conversations with Matt. I don't want to put him on the spot by any means, but we've talked about what the evolution of his business from a blank slate standpoint, as well as a public art standpoint, what that looks like as part of either an incorporation of this strategy,
Mm-hmm.
or as well as how do we maintain his presence in Gahanna. I had a phenomenal latte, and I've had many at his establishment over the years that I've been here. Only been here 13 months now, so I can't say years.
It feels like yours.
I've aged poorly in this time.
we're rough, I know. Rough crowd.
But I mean, but we've had that commitment, and I know Courtney on our team has regularly engaged him and understand that. And to your point about the Herb Center and that, I mean, I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
I understand you loud and clear. I think it's an incorporation of how it we define. And we had a conversation earlier about, scale, facade, incorporation of design, the architectural feeling of that space. If it can't be maintained or saved, how do we incorporate it into the design? Those are all things that'll be under consideration as part of the
Okay,
project.
where's my flea market going to go?
Honestly, that's a bigger issue.
And that
I
VFW
agree with
parking lot
that.
is.
Quite frankly, Carrie, that's a whole bigger issue, because we consistently try to balance with the business community down there,
right.
shutting down US 62.
Right.
It's not little Mill Street. It's US 62. It's the corridor through Gahanna. So everything from the car show to the flea market to blues and jazz to holiday lights.
They kind of all need a new place.
They need a new place. So
Yeah.
that's something that discussions we've been having for 2 years now on where can that next place be? And honestly,
Okay.
I don't have the answer for you
Well,
yet.
I'd love to be involved in any of those conversations just to
Absolutely.
bring whatever ideas, because I'm all about
Sure.
solutions. I really am.
And those are the things that those are things I love about Gahanna. Those are things everybody loves about Gahanna. So how do we fit everything in? How do we accommodate that?
We keep it without losing it.
Correct.
And without
Right,
changing
without
it so
one
drastically.
negatively impacting another as well.
And
Okay.
candidly, I mean, I have this dream, and I've worked in a lot of larger cities, worked in a lot of smaller cities in my career, and I always have looked at Walnut Street as being this wonderful connector pathway of not only a road infrastructure, but as a pedestrian corridor, greenway of sorts that could connect from the heart of Creekside and the creek itself back into Shoal Park at some extended way. When you see some of the developments that have happened in other communities of both our size and smaller and larger, their ability to flex that existing road infrastructure to accommodate higher densities of pedestrian traffic, especially on weekends or special events. So you're stretching that through the neighborhood and then into real open public spaces like Shull. you're right there. And then if you're into Shull, then you're on the bike trail back into the new library, and you're connecting into Hamilton. It could work really well, but it's going to take time. To the mayor's point.
Okay, I agree with that. I think that as long as we're all kind of considering all the changes this will bring about.
Absolutely.
I'm all for it. My last question is there any concern about a hotel being that close to an elementary school? Is there any, is that a thing? Is there, legally, is that a problem at all? Because we're talking about a hotel.
Are you trying to draw a distinction between? My wife works in anti-money laundering and anti-human trafficking. Are you trying to connect human trafficking to a hotel?
Listen, I know we're going to have a great hotel, but I am kind of concerned that hotels do sometimes, I don't know. Hotel means a lot of strangers, a lot of people that,
I'm not aware of a zoning restriction or state or local law that would preclude having a hotel probably within 1,000 feet or 1,000 yards
Nor am I aware
of a
that
I just
school.
wondered. I wasn't
impacting
Yeah,
another.
I just wondered if that was a thing and if that had been considered. Personally, I'd love to see a hotel on Granville Street where that city area is at the end of Shull, next to the dry cleaners. But I think that would be a great place. But okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Buddy.
Matt Robertson, Blank Slate Coffee, the Plant Library, all the nonsense at the car wash. I appreciated hearing all the survey data. I love hearing how Gahanna sees itself and what Gahanna wants to see. A lot of those business types that were identified are frankly businesses that struggle. There's a reason we don't have a bakery. There's a reason we don't have these kind of boutique, workshop-oriented things. There's a reason having kind of activity-oriented businesses haven't worked. And that's because they struggle. So my question is, with new development, the tendency I have seen and experienced as a small business owner is with new spaces like this, that frankly the comes down to the numbers. The per square foot price is just prohibitive to any of these business types. Are there plans to mitigate that in some way?
Great question. So, and I want to frame, if I can frame the first part of your question as something as well. Part of the reason why those types of users and end users struggle in the marketplace is because of lack of foot traffic, lack of customer base. And so that's why I think it's really important for us as we're looking through a lens of developing some of these new spaces and creating these new opportunities for small businesses to locate in our community, is that we balance those interests by creating that foot traffic necessary to support those businesses, as well as creating a more vibrancy area to sustain those businesses long term. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, my team traveled up to Bellefontaine and Logan County and met with small nations about that very issue. One of the things that they've talked about is how do you balance some of the need of having that local charm. So I think the data showed, I think 70-some% of those respondents to the survey wanted to have locally owned businesses, or local ownership was very important, as a high importance value to them. I think that's part of the defining character that will, as an RFP goes out, as we look through a lens of how this is redeveloped. One of the things that we'll be looking for is incorporating developers or partner to identify who has experience working with small businesses and not just national chains or partners that can come in and pay 25 or 30 bucks a square foot, but can help underwrite some $5 or $10 a square foot spaces to kind of get small businesses in, established, and moving forward in the community, if that makes sense. I think that answers your question. Mostly. Hopefully.
It does, and maybe we're getting into the weeds with some of this. The town that I graduated high school from is a small town in Colorado, and in a lot of ways, it is the old small town Main Street feel that these mixed-use developments seek to imitate. First floor retail, residential on top.
Sure.
In any of those old spaces that you love going to, those little towns that you love touring, the storefronts are relatively small.
Yeah.
They're contained. There's certain.
They're smaller width, but they're a little elongated so they can maximize the internal footprint while minimizing street footprint kind of a situation. We saw that a lot today in Bell Fountain, for example.
Right. So is that within the scope of?
That's way in the weeds, my friend. I appreciate that comment. I think aesthetically, it's like you know it when you see it, kind of a design standpoint. And again, that'll be something that we worked out through Planning Commission and final development process and what have you from a planning standpoint. I think we're hoping to identify a developer who understands those basics. That's part of the identifying criteria that we'll be utilizing. But as far as like having 7 spaces that are 1,000 square feet, that are 20 feet by whatever, that's way down the
That's
road.
down the road. Yeah.
Sure. And I totally get that. And I think as I've heard people from Gahanna speak, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think I'm speaking for more people. The fear, and I'm going to use that word fear,
Yep.
is that we've gotten into moments like this where we start the process and then somewhere with good intentions, somewhere down the road, we go, oh man, that would have been really great. Oh man, but I guess, the market is the market, and the market dictates 25, 30 square feet and at
Sure.
least 3,000 square foot per user, stuff like that. Sure. So my question is like, how do we do some of these things that have been talked about? How do we at the outset
Sure.
build into this process things that
I think part of what we're talking about this evening and this part of this initial dialogue is to take that feedback back to M&A and make sure that it's incorporated effectively as part of that master strategy. I think when you've seen, and I heard a lot of folks this evening speak to me in very blunt terms, I won't use some of those blunt terms right now, about the history of Creekside and what that project was represented to the community 15, 20 years ago versus how it's been realized today. I think what you're missing as part of that conversation is what this is. There was a pitch, there was an idea that was provided by a private developer who had a private interest in the project to make this kind of happen. What we're saying from a community is saying this is kind of what we're envisioning in the balance of the area to realize that real potential. The city, I think it was highlighted in the video, the municipality in this case controls the plan. And so we're able to incorporate these aspirational goals, these ideals, these opportunities, and then identify the right partner to bring those ideals to fruition versus having a partner tell us what they want to do down here. There is a balancing act. I'm not going to be naive. Market-driven opportunities have to happen not in a bubble, but in the real market space. But I think there's opportunity here. I think you're seeing enough of that dynamic in other communities to realize that we could do something very similar here and make it uniquely Gahanna. I actually want to go.
Jeannie.
Okay, is this apartments or a hotel?
Which one?
This one over here. I know it's just,
That would be envisioned as a apartment style development, first floor retail, upstairs multifamily apartment.
okay, so my question is back to parking.
Sure.
And I know you already kind of didn't answer it, but kind of answered it. And bodies, how many bodies have to be down there to sustain these lower level businesses?
Sure.
Can we ever get enough bodies down there? And can we still have enough parking for
To accommodate.
the community? Not just the people who are going to be down there, but
Sure.
the community, because I'm not seeing it. But maybe if
Well,
you're going
I-
to take this lot, this apartments right here, or townhomes, that's a whole parking lot gone.
Well, I
So-
always laugh at that. I appreciate the sentiment and I understand where you're coming from on the parking side of it. I've rarely ever been to one of these forums where it's showing the hotel user, the townhomes, the mixed use, and the rendered parking garage. As part of the project, I had a conversation with a young man earlier who was speaking about this very issue as well. I think part of the strategy right now is to understand what those high opportunities are. We think those high opportunities are on North High for sale housing. We think it's on Mill Street for these types of uses. And then what the balance of opportunity and massing could look like would service the garage. I will commit, there's no way we could do this on a surface lot or a single surface lot. We need to go to a multi-story structured parking, not subsurface.
But where are you going to put that?
There's,
There's places.
yes, ma'am.
You're sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Because parking is already so bad down there. And now you're adding, I know we need the people.
Well, in all
Do
due
anything without
respect,
the
and I
people, but we
understand,
have to park the people too.
and I understand that parking can be a constraint down there. But I also know from our prior conversations that you're not a fan of going underground parking.
No, I hate that.
Correct. So on any given day, there's anywhere between 175 and 235 spaces available in that garage. Whether or not people want to use that or not, I can't help. What I can do is make sure that whatever is happening above ground is accommodated and maximized for the public's use as well as those who want to venture in this space. But it'd be naive for any of us in this room to think that the mix of a new garage with the utilization of our existing garage isn't going to balance this thing out.
So everything will have enough parking for itself.
Yeah, I'm not engaging M&A not to have something that doesn't accommodate parking.
Okay. And that hotel would be beautiful on Granville.
I don't disagree with you. The challenge would have been, I'm going to answer the question for those who couldn't hear at home. The comment was about putting the hotel on Granville Street. The challenge, quite frankly, in where these uses go is where do you find the willing seller of the land for it? If there was a willing seller of land on Granville to do some of this activity, I think we'd be having a conversation this evening around redeveloping portions of Granville Street in the city of Gahanna and not being on Mill Street or not being on North High Street.
Right. We have one parcel there.
We have one parcel.
One parcel there. Yes, sir.
Sir.
A little nervous because I've never done this before.
Oh, you're fine.
I just had
Well,
like
thanks for being here.
I just had like two.
He grilled me earlier. Don't let him be nervous here. He's
All right.
playing it close to his vest. He hit
Okay.
me with a couple good questions.
Okay.
So I just have like two quick clarifying things. I know we like kind of got over, so you can go really quick with them.
Sure.
So the first one was like, just generally kind of how set in stone are the ideas? Like I know there's a lot of like people have talked about the opposition to kind of putting the hotel on Mill Street. Just to be
Sure.
like honest, like I don't think many people were worried about it. So it's like, is community engagement here going to be able to influence that, or is that kind of out of the scope of kind of community input?
This is an ongoing dialogue. I think what we came forward this evening with was things that have come forward in both my office as well as in M&A's conversation, as well as the market feedback that we've already kind of received on some of the early scales of this. But again, this is something that we're going to push out to the private market as well to understand where the viability is and how it works to Mr. Roberson's earlier point around scalability of small storefronts to accommodate small business. If the hotel doesn't fly or doesn't vibe, I mean, I would much rather put a mixed-use property in there because I think that at the end of the day, we need beds and heads and beds to drive this opportunity more so than just tourism-based dollars. But I think it'd be naive to say that something's not going to happen at the corner of Walnut and Mill Street on the south side of that intersection that isn't more impactful than the existing insurance office that's there.
Yeah, I have one more clarifying thing
Sure.
that'll get to my main thing. So I think a lot of people agree keeping like Creekside on like the human level is really important. So I was wondering like not to like I always like the word bubble things they always make. I'm like how do we like what are the set concrete goals that the project has to make like walkability like more than just a statement? Like I know this is like mixed zoning and like make sure that there's other forms of transportation, all that stuff. Like what are the more tangible elements that are going to making Creekside walkable a like reality?
Sure. So I think what you see down there is a hodgepodge. I think someone said a hodgepodge of something earlier of inaccessible or dilapidated sidewalks, quite frankly. So I think you're going to see a lot of a large-scale improvement in the streetscape and especially the hardscape areas to support broader ADA-compliant sidewalk engagements along the street front, as well as protected sidewalks to allow for safer pedestrian movements throughout the corridors itself. Better lit, more accessible crosswalks. I think when you look through a lens of where the crosswalks are, they're at really kind of odd spots that don't really mesh with some of the areas of where pedestrians traditionally want to go to in the existing Creekside, as well as what we're kind of proposing here. So I think you're going to see a lot of that kind of mitigation elements. And then, it's a supportive infrastructure standpoint. So you're talking about some protective bollards. You're talking about bike infrastructure to support bike lane traffic and inclusions.
About that. So good.
Yeah. So, I mean, saying you're doing something that's in the multimodal concept is saying something, but when we're literally meeting with Linkus tomorrow to kind of talk through a lot of this and understand how a transit-oriented development could work in these spaces to allow for better access of pedestrians to transit, to bikes, and the existing 20-some-odd miles of trails in our community, that's something completely different.
Well, that and the active transportation
Yes,
plan,
absolutely.
that we'll be pursuing. There actually, the city has had an easement back behind the Shampooch building that goes up, and it was, the reason that easement existed was for trail connectivity. So the trails that currently go through Creekside and come up are supposed to come up and connect to Mill Street and then be able to continue the trail on. Right now, we're also working on design work, and this is a little outside the scope we're talking, but it's still in line with what you're asking. We're working on design work for a trail connector with where the new library is that will go over the creek to Shoal Park. Nate talked a little bit earlier about kind of that connectivity from Walnut Street all the way down to Shoal Park. So that's a factor. So every little piece that we're doing is all fitting into the pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, and then I can go to like my actual question. Sorry.
Those are really good questions.
Those were
Where's
good
the actual
questions. I know.
question
What are you
coming
apologizing
from?
for?
And then so like you kind of talked about how like this is going to be mostly done by like private developers, right? So like with that, like what is like you talked about the master plan. So what in the master plan is going to ensure that the community is like prioritized? So like like basically like asking like does the master plan have teeth? So it's like is it just kind of like a guidelines on the honor system, like hey guys, make sure it vibes with the community, or is it going to be like hey, you like we put out this master plan guideline for you guys, either maybe they're not in compliance or they're kind of pushing back on it, like do we have teeth to be like no, can we walk away like if you're not compliant? Like sorry, that's
No, there's a very short answer to that. Yes. The longer answer to that is that the Community Improvement Corporation is kind of leading the redevelopment effort. So that is a city-related entity that has taken some ownership of certain lands as well as options on other lands. And so that's why they're being the selective agent to identify the proper partner. This isn't done in a bubble where my office is going to be like, hey, private development, come hang out with me. This is a public body formed by the city that'll be leading this effort. And so that's why there's teeth, because they'll have the ultimate say to partner up with and identify the right strategic partner for it versus just haphazardly doing it. Does that make sense?
yes, yeah.
So, but to his question around what teeth will the strategy have teeth? I mean, can the developer just go, yeah, we're just going to do whatever you want. Thanks for your idea, city, but
Then the CIC doesn't sell the land to the developer.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't like kind of like, hey, like do it, and then like that, like
Yeah,
there's no,
no,
like
then the transaction
sure it
between the
Oh,
CIC
that's why
and the
this is
developer.
different than anything we've done before.
Yeah.
We've never done this before.
Okay, cool. I was just worried like accountability.
And
was
candidly,
important,
this is
so-
how it's
appreciate
done,
that.
kind of done in other communities. So this is how, when you're looking through a lens of what other cities are doing in our region, and they're trying to say this is the aspirational goals that we have, they impact a quasi-government related agency to kind of lead the development charge in that way, so that there is a transactional point here where we say we either sell to you because you're going to do contractually what you say you're going to do, or we're not going to engage you because you're not willing to contractually obligate to what we're saying you're going to do.
Okay, thank you.
So we were supposed to go till 8 o'clock. It's 8:25.
Oh,
So-
wow.
Well, your answers were long. So are there any further questions, Amanda? Well, last question.
So I'm asking from a resident perspective because I don't think we've heard the resident perspective. I am Amanda Ferguson. I have lived on Shepherd Street for 26 years. I have seen the redevelopment of our street, putting new curbs in, and the fact that we cannot get 2 cars down the street and have cars parked along one side. The same thing is happening on Walnut Street. I see it every day when I drive down that street. What are we going to do to ensure the infrastructure is correct for the increase in traffic? Because this is going to increase traffic in those neighborhoods, in the neighborhoods surrounding this area. And, you know, we did not get new sidewalks. Some places got new sidewalks, and how is that going to factor in? So what are we doing to kind of protect the people that are residents in that neighborhood?
Do you want to handle the sidewalk first?
No, you go first, and then I'll handle sidewalk.
Thanks.
Well, because that was the secondary question.
I think that's, and it's a very fair point. I think part of the strategy needs to be, you know, we're focusing on the transactional elements there along Walnut, on Mill, on North High, and you're absolutely correct. There will be secondary and tertiary impacts into the existing neighborhood. I think that's engagement with our public service department to make sure that whatever's happening as part of a redevelopment plan extends, at least on a public infrastructure standpoint, sidewalks, curbs, those improvements, some widening if necessary, extends into it. One thing that's always interesting is how private development can leverage future public investments. So it's our ability to obtain other grant dollars or other resources to support other elements. So our ability to go out and pursue Ohio Public Works grant dollars to do what you're kind of advocating for here. It can't happen without some type of economic growth opportunity. That's one of the largest actually key indicators on their scoring sheet. So I think being that advocate in that space and understanding what those infrastructure needs are going to be, and then also engaging public safety. I mean, what you just shared with us a moment ago is, parking on the street at certain times for extended periods of time cause a public safety hazard. At least that's what I heard you say. Whether you said that explicitly or not on the microphone is different. So that means engaging our police department and understanding if we need to put up.
I'm going to talk to you about that afterward.
Yeah, if we need to put up no parking signs or limited parking signs, or that's it. To me, that's low-hanging fruit, quite frankly. But looking through a lens of how do we make sure that what we're proposing here can leverage additional dollars to support future infrastructure improvements, so that if things happen down the road, or if we really get hot and heavy with the greenway concept that I talked about earlier about moving things down Walnut, that it's being mindful of the neighbors, but also being scaled properly with the existing infrastructure that's in place. Mayor.
Well, sidewalks are kind of a tangential issue for this, so kind of twofold. That number one, with regard to as areas get redeveloped, as Nate just said, like for right now, there are no sidewalks on Walnut Street. They're between Mill and High, there are no sidewalks. So as those properties were both north and south were to be developed, putting in sidewalks would be a requirement of the development. So sidewalks would be added as part of that. Your particular issue on your street with regard to your street was repaved? Okay. Right. So we typically would not rebuild sidewalks as part of that. However, with the new sidewalk maintenance program that was adopted last year, that will be an affordability tool to help. I mean, sidewalks at the end of the day are the residents' responsibility, but the sidewalk maintenance program was designed to help with that, so that we can have better conditioned sidewalks in a way that is affordable for our folks to be able to deal with that. So, Correct. So let me ask you a question. How do you feel about the paver sidewalks along Mill Street? Exactly.
Agreed.
That's why I thank you, because that's how I feel about them. It's great to integrate some bricks as decorative pieces, but to walk on those is extremely challenging.
Well, and especially in non-ideal walking conditions, rain, snow, ice. I personally have fallen, and people around me held their breath and thought I had died. So it's really important to make sure that whatever's happening here. I'm sorry, Mary, it really did happen. It was terrifying.
Hey, try walking in these.
I walk in flats and I fell hard. It was over the Christmas program. I was like, whoa, this was rough. So it's really important to make sure that whatever we're doing is being mindful of our existing residents, but as well as ADA compliance standards and things of that nature, because I think some of those can be glossed over pretty easily.
Were you the one I had the conversation with around, like, within a 1 block area, we have 3 different types of sidewalks? Was that? I remember having a conversation with somebody, not.
But it feels right,
within the
doesn't
last
it?
2 to 3 months, and we were down in that area. I don't remember, and like literally within a 2 block radius, we have 3 different types of sidewalks. So I totally agree with you. As we redevelop, making sure that we have that overall plan for what they're going to look like throughout the area is going to be extremely important.
Well, making sure that, again, to me, I'm a ADA person, so making sure that it's wide enough so that 2 wheelchairs can pass without having to move out of the way of one. I mean, I worked on that type of project one of my prior lives in Pittsburgh, as well as with the city of Zanesville. So those are key drivers for me, because I've seen those issues, and I've seen people going into the street who have no business.
Well, and actually, last point. So last year, one of the things we also did as we were developing the sidewalk maintenance program was we had officially adopted our ADA transition plan, which is something we'd never had done either. So having an ADA transition plan in place that identifies all of the issues in the city, and that's a living, breathing document that will, as we knock something off, we'll add something back on, or, that we have identify. But having something that actually identifies what in the city needs to be addressed, everything from crosswalk signals to sidewalks, crosswalks and and all of those things are all included in that plan. So as we do our budget every year, taking pieces out of that plan for this is what we're going to address this year and work through that is also something that we have in place now. So I'm gonna call it at 8:30. So we're gonna stick around and still answer any questions if anybody else did not have a chance.
It just won't be on camera. I'm
just won't be on
sorry,
camera.
everyone at home.
But for those of you, or if you're still watching on camera, feel free to, this is, as we've said multiple times, this is the beginning of the conversation. It is not a one and done conversation. This is a dialogue that will be continuing for not just tomorrow and next week, but for the next year and the year after. This is, again, going to be a living and breathing thing that continues to evolve and grow. So please reach out to us at any time. If you have questions, we're happy to have a conversation. We want to hear your input, answer any questions that you have.
Kevin, if you can share that up on the screen into the feed. That's the mayor's contact information as well as my contact information. I welcome the calls. I welcome the emails. Let's connect. Let's talk about this. As I mentioned when I first started my comments, change is never easy. In fact, it's probably the hardest thing we have to do as individuals is change. So let's have those conversations to the mayor's point and just keep moving forward. So.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there and staying here for 2.5 hours. Thanks to those at home, and more to come. Stay tuned.